free.
From the Foundation Studio right here on Biloxi's Back Bay, I want to welcome you to Super Talk Outdoors, where we celebrate every single Monday at lunchtime the world-class outdoors of the state of Mississippi. Thank you for joining us on the powerful Super Talk Mississippi Radio Network, or on Super Talk TV at C Spire TV. But if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or your favorite podcast, it's August the 15th, 2022. You know, I've mentioned the last couple of weeks that we have tried to get offshore and we couldn't get offshore. The weather's just been strange this year. The good news is there's not been too much rain, so the salinities in the backwaters of coastal Mississippi has been just about right. So the fishing near shore has been terrific. And when you could get offshore, fishing was really good. But we watched all the models over about a 48-hour period and finally got a window Saturday morning, and we took it and we went to a place that is a little special place for us. It's south of Chandler Island. From my house, about 82 miles. And we hit that spot and we caught some beautiful snapper and some mangrove, both red snapper and mangrove snapper. And then we noticed off on the horizon there were a bunch of shrimp boats. So the shrimp fleet that you would normally see up around the 50-foot curve off of Horn Island and Ship Island and Petty Boyce Island, that shrimp fleet was really that much further out. So from Horn Island, about best I could tell, about 55 to 60 miles offshore. And so we watched we started counting all the shrimp boats, and we said, we need to go check those out, because where we were fishing, the rig we were fishing at was only about 72 feet of water, but it's really close to the curve as it begins to get really deep, and that's one of the reasons why it's so good. It's really, really good fishing there. So anyway, when we got done at that particular rig, we hit a couple of other rigs. And then we went on out and checked out the shrimp boats. And for people who've been out to the shrimp boats in that depth of water, you know that what you normally see are just tons of bonitas and jacks. There's lots of sharks. I posted a video a couple of years ago of literally one of the most significant shark frenzies I've ever seen. Thousands of sharks of all different sizes. It was truly remarkable. But that's what you see. The fish get all congregated behind those shrimp boats. On Saturday, it was only jack crevalles, maybe an occasional shark, but mostly jack crevalles, and they were all huge, 30 to 40-pound jack crevalles. And you could have put a bare hook in the water and caught a jack on Saturday. It was incredible. We posted a video, kind of a compilation of our trip, at the Super Talk Outdoors Facebook page. If you want to take a look at it, you can go look at it. But kind of beautiful conditions all day long. While it was raining a little bit on the coast, it wasn't raining offshore. And as we got back home, the rain even on the shore kind of subsided. So that was good news. It was one of those kind of perfect trips all the way around. And we did, the reason you run these shrimp boats is you're looking for lemonfish, cobia. And we were able to catch one around 40 to 50 pounds. And a little video of us gaffing that, putting it on the boat, is also part of that compilation of pictures and videos that we posted on the Super Talk Outdoors Facebook page. So you can go take a look at it. But, just another reminder of why I continue to call Mississippi the capital of the outdoors in America. When you add it all up, man, there's not a better place on earth to enjoy this incredible array of outdoor activities than right here in Mississippi. I can tell you that for sure. We're headed up to the Delta this weekend. It's a busy time of year. I was up there a couple of weeks ago. I mentioned on the show the three farms that we have there. When you get off, by the way, the crops look better than I've ever seen. Absolutely incredible. But when you get into the areas where we hunt, the trails need a little work. The food plots are growing rapidly. I say this a lot, but the truth is, this time of year, nature has a way of just kind of taking control. And you better go fight nature back, or when it comes planting season for food plots, et cetera, you'll have your work, cut out for you. So we're going to go up this weekend and do some bush hogging, and it's a great time of the year to kind of be in the outdoors. Even if you're not shooting or catching, you're just enjoying being there and getting ready. Part of the fun of hunting, actually, is the camaraderie that you're engaged in as you get ready for the hunting season. So it's that time of year. Great fishing offshore, getting ready for for hunting, and the rest is kind of history. Hey, we've got a great show today. We're going to talk a little bit about the Conservation Trust Fund, the Outdoors Stewardship Trust Fund that was passed this past legislative session. Kind of give you an update on the board members that are being appointed, and why we need to hit the ground running coming out of the gate on this to really encourage people to submit the best possible innovative programs they can, so we can make this a great demonstration project with a lot of potential federal funds to go with it. But we're also going to kind of get the latest, what's happening in the arena of Ducks Unlimited and the Nature Conservancy this time of year. And without any further ado, let me bring my friend Ed Penny, who's Director of Public Policy for the Ducks Unlimited for the Southern region, and Alex Littlejohn, who's Mississippi State Director for the Nature Conservancy, and good friends, regulars here on this show and my show on the Coast Call Coast View. So how you guys doing?
Doing great, Ricky. Thanks for the chance to talk to you again. It's always good to see your face.
It's good to see you too. How you doing, Alex?
Man, I can't complain. I appreciate you having us. Good to see everybody again.
So I mentioned, or I heard this kind of conversation between the two of you as we were getting ready to ramp up the show. And so Ed, as you guys sort of look around at the work that you guys have been doing, what are you thinking about this upcoming duck season?
Good question, Ricky. So, anybody who's spent any time out in the field or in the woods chasing ducks, they know that it's been pretty tough the last 2 or 3 years, and there's no denying that. Most of the ducks that we're seeing are old ducks, and old ducks are hard to kill, just like turkeys. So if you're killing mallards when they're old and wise, you're a pretty good duck hunter. So it's been tough. Breeding populations have been lower than average, lower than the last several years. And this year, though, we expect an uptick. We expect it to get back to average, we hope. It has been wetter in the prairies, particularly in the U.S. prairies, eastern North Dakota, eastern South Dakota, up into Saskatchewan, places where that produce a lot of the ducks that we see here in the Mississippi Flyway. So, we're getting back to what we would say normal, but we're far from great breeding populations. So it's not going to keep me from not being out in the field. I'm looking forward to teal season and dove season, and then when the weather gets a little cooler, chasing ducks again. So we're excited.
So Ed, when you look, we talked a lot about last year, how dry it was, just an incredibly dry year. And this year we've had a lot more rain in the Delta. I wouldn't say an excessive amount, but I hope that that's helped. And also when you factor in the heat wave, what are you seeing in terms of water beginning to hold up in places where you need it? And how has the heat wave just across the United States, particularly in the Flyway, affected things?
That's a good question too. So this time of year, DU biologists and engineers are busy doing projects, and they're going strong now. I mean, they're turning dirt, they're creating wetlands, restoring wetlands, and on public lands here in the state of Mississippi. And when it's dry like it is right now, they're working hard, and that's been one of the good things about it being dry. And this year has been what I would say more normal precipitation. We haven't had. We've had some big rains the last couple of weeks, but it's been dry when it needs to be dry, and it's been wet when it needs to be wet. And we were just talking about how crops seem to be doing pretty well right now. So, the heat wave has been tough on us, but critters like ducks and deer tend to adapt pretty well. But it always takes cold weather to bring the ducks south to Mississippi. I'd love to predict what that could be, but I'm not going to. I'd get quoted, and I'd lose pretty quickly on that one. But all we can do is pray for cold weather.
Hey, do you guys talk? I'm actually curious about something, and then we'll come over to Alex and see what his group is doing this time of year. When you look at the war in Ukraine and how it's affected the worldwide markets, as particularly obviously agriculture, it's affected everything, but agriculture has been impacted significantly. What I see in the Delta is where I would normally see a lot of corn or maybe cotton, you see a lot more soybeans. I don't know if that's a trend throughout the entire Delta, but I'm curious if the crop, balance that you would normally see with a little bit of corn, a little bit of soybean, a little bit of cotton, or maybe a lot of all three, if that has some, the fact that it's been changed somewhat because of the price of commodities, does that impact you guys in any way?
Yeah, that's also a great question. I mean, with crop prices being high, farmers want to farm and they want to grow crops, and by all means, they need to feed the world. The question becomes: are farmers, when they're trying to plant and grow on more acres, are they impacting wetlands? Are they impacting habitat? There's a lot of conservation programs out there that conserve marginal land and land that's not good for growing crops, and we want to make sure that that land is continuing to be productive for wildlife and for water quality and so many other things. But we are seeing some acres going back into production that have been in conservation. People are, contracts, CRP contracts are coming out, and that's well within the landowners and producers' decision to do that. But we are seeing an impact on that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that, which is one more reason why the Conservation Trust Fund is something that we need to double down on. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Alex Littlejohn and Ed Penny. We'll find out what the latest is in the Nature Conservancy world. We'll talk about the latest on the Stewardship Trust Fund and then whatever else we might want to get into before this is over.
On Mississippi's Outdoors. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. I have my friends Ed Penny and Alex Littlejohn. Ed is with Ducks Unlimited, and Alex is with the Nature Conservancy. And it's just always interesting to touch base with these guys because they've got their ears really close to the ground. One thing we were talking about off the air was about international firms coming in, buying land and running the cost of land up. Some land that a year or two ago might have been worth $5,000 an acre because it's irrigated and has the more modern irrigation capabilities, going for $7,000 or more. It's incredible, and that's scary, actually. We'll come back to that in just a second. Coming over to you for a minute, Alex. What's the latest in your world with the Nature Conservancy?
Well, I'll go back to Ed's previous segment. I will tell you, I do not envy Ed or my friends at Ducks or Delta Waterfowl when you walk into duck season, or even the waterfowl biologists in state, because it's the toughest time of year for them, because everybody wants to know where are the ducks, and it's not due in part to the work that they're doing. I mean, if it was due in part to the work, they would tell you the ducks are everywhere. I mean, the work that they do across the Prairie Pothole region, Canada, and even down into Mexico it's incredible. So I don't envy them this time of year, but it is an exciting time of year. Much like Ed said, we've enjoyed some of the dry weather because it allowed us to get out and get some of our projects really moving down the line. Some of them are going to finish about a year out earlier because we had planned for some wetter time in the field that would limit us. But much like Ed described, our books closed June 30th, and so we're in proposal deadlines and grant deadlines and financial deadlines. So summertime gets real busy between the field work and as well as the office work, but there's no shortage of it out there, that's for sure.
It's an interesting time of year for all of us, but your work, both you and Ed's work, it's year round. There's always something to happen. Just as it relates to the Nature Conservancy and all the partners you've been able to develop, and the number of members that you have and whatever, you spend a lot of time on the road these days, just talking to people. What are you hearing from people?
I would tell you it's been interesting and somewhat comforting. Some of these conversations, you feel like you're back into a state of normal. Prior to COVID, you're actually able to sit down and be across the table with folks that you normally would have seen on a weekly or monthly basis, and people are talking about the things again that matters to our neck of the woods and our world, which is conservation. Look, there's no shortage of crisis out there that we could talk about and be distracted with and deserves our focus, but it has been fun to be able to sit down with those people again and talk about our work and see the excitement and talking about upcoming deer season and duck season and just hunting season in general. And heck, you mentioned it when you opened up. I mean, the fishing off the coast has been great this year because we haven't had the impacts from freshwater that we've seen in the last few years. So I don't know, there just seems to be a little more pep in the step and a little more comfort that maybe we've kind of come through come, there's light at the end of the tunnel. We've come through the dark clouds and are on the backside of a lot of this stuff we've all had to deal with personally and professionally the last 2 years.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. When you think about the dark cloud from having a hunting camp point of view, I still wonder about what the cost of fertilizer is going to be when we get into planting. I'm hoping it will continue to come down. But hey, let's we're going to move over to the Stewardship Trust Fund here shortly. But I just want to see what you guys are hearing. One of the farms that I'm involved with was purchased, the ag portion that was purchased by a German company, and they paid nearly $7,000 an acre for it. But I'm here, I've been reading all over America where the Chinese have been coming in buying a lot of ag land, and there are other players in this international buying spree that we're seeing. What are you hearing, Ed? Are you hearing this is really a trend all over the place?
Yeah, it's the same thing everywhere. I would say in too many cases, Mississippi's kind of tail end of this kind of thing. So a lot of upper Midwestern states have been dealing with this for the last 10, 15 years, and it's finally hitting us. People recognize the value of prime farmland for obvious reasons. And, Alex is working for TNC. He's seeing the same thing around the country, that Mississippi is catching up, and it's costing conservation as well. The cost of conservation goes up when land prices go up, and by all means, landowners and farmers and ranchers can make the right decision on their property and what to do with it. And it sure is hard to turn down a pretty significant offer when it's given to you.
What you hearing, Alex?
The same, when you talk about these international buyers coming in, my first, and Ed and I have talked about this at length, my first question is whether or not they will adhere to the same conservation values that a lot of our landowners here adhere to. They're normalized with, this is just kind of part and parcel to the culture and the roots that we have. And I haven't really seen how that's going to flesh out, but that's really where my mind goes, much to what Ed just said. Not only is the price of conservation going to go up with land prices, but are we going to see implementation go up, or are we going to see it retreat? How are some of these buyers, these new buyers to this world, going to react to it?
Well, coming back to, you guys are involved in all kinds of important efforts as it relates to creating habitat for wildlife. But you heard what Ed said a few minutes ago, that we're seeing land that, and I've seen this too on the farms that we're involved in. You're seeing crops in areas where you used to not see crops. Small little parcel over here, they maybe wouldn't have spent any bothered going over there and planting that, but now every square inch is planted. And that does take habitat out of circulation. Are you concerned about it? Do you see the trend, and what's your thoughts about it?
I'll speak first. First of all, a farmer's got to make sure that he can make money on a piece of property when he plants and grows a crop. A lot of times the land that is coming out of, quote, conservation, for example, a CRP contract, that's marginal land. It hasn't been able to make a crop. Now there's new technology with seeds and chemicals and other things that they could allow a farmer to grow a crop on that marginal land that's been in other uses for a while, but in many cases they're still not going to be able to produce a crop, and unfortunately that cost is going to hit them. And we want to make sure that conservation is conservation, and I'll talk about conservation reserve program, how that needs to be a viable option for farmers into the future, into the next farm bill, so farmers are not going further and further into debt trying to grow a crop on land that floods 4 out of 5 years or 9 out of 10 years, or is too dry and too sandy to irrigate and grow a crop. So, they got to make wise decisions, and we hope conservation is part of that.
Yeah, that's a lot of my farmer friends would call that insurance farming for the most part. So what are you concerned about that trend, Alex, from a conservation point of view?
Yeah, much like, my mother's from the Delta, a lot of my family's from the Delta, so, I can appreciate the needs from the landowner's perspective, and rightfully so. I mean, they, as Ed pointed out, they have to make a living. I mean, it's their livelihood, and the economic return is very key to them, obviously more so than others sometimes, but very much a large factor of their decision making year to year. And much like the farmer has to respond to the economic needs, I think conservation should have to respond to the markets and economic needs as well. And we have to be honest about that. What we were getting per acre for CRP, or what is now WRE, what was previously WRP, 15, 20 years ago, is not going to keep up today. It's just simply not. If we want to continue to be able to compete with some of the economic drivers that have really crept in the last 5 years.
Well, I tell you, one thing that is very true, that in the last few years of being heavily involved in hunting in the Delta, I have said this on the show before, and I feel more strongly about it today. We're so lucky to have the farmers that we have in this state. I mean, we would be toast if without farmers. And I work so closely with them, and they're so incredibly cooperative in working with us to make sure that our hunting experience is the best it can be. And man, I watch it through their eyes. It's tough, man. I mean, every rain is a potential threat, or every day of lack of rain is potential threat. And having to constantly think about, do we need to lay some pipe down to do some irrigation, or bring the pipes up, or is now the time we need to go harvest? I mean, look, it is a tough world these guys live in, and they go at it every year, and they wouldn't do anything other than that. And it's amazing to me how lucky we are to have a farming community. To me, the farmers and outdoorsmen, they're partners in this incredible journey, and without them, we would be toast. I can't say that enough. I'm particularly pleased to have developed a close relationship with the Dunn family up in the Greenwood area. They farm thousands of acres, and they've been an incredibly good friend to us. That is for sure. Hey, when we come back, we're going to continue the conversation with Alex Littlejohn from the Nature Conservancy and Ed Penny from Ducks Unlimited. We're going to get the latest on the Outdoors Stewardship Trust Fund that we all so strongly believe will be a game changer for Mississippi going forward. We'll see you after this break.
Whistling that sweet soul for him. I said 3 Mississippi walls and 4-foot balls.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors from the Foundation Studio right here on Biloxi's Back Bay. Look forward to actually saying from the Mississippi Delta soon. We'll be doing some shows up there in the upcoming on the upcoming calendar of events for this show. Hey, Alex, let's come over to you for a second. For people who may not have really paid close attention to this, why don't you give them a sense of what the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund is, and why we're so excited about what it is and how it's going to be a game changer from a conservation outdoor enjoyment point of view for the state of Mississippi.
Sure, I'd be happy to. It's essentially, in a nutshell, it's a grant application process by which individuals from across the state, and when I say that, groups, conservation groups, federal and state agencies can apply as well, but groups like Ducks Unlimited, Nature Conservancy, Wildlife Mississippi, Delta Windbirds up in Oxford, Land Trust, and the list goes on, but also municipalities can put in for conservation efforts they want to see implemented in their backyard or in a region, or that fit to their conservation plans across the state. But for the first time in Mississippi, this is a state allocated resource. It's appropriated by the state legislature. This past session, they appropriated $10 million into the trust fund. And so we hope to see those dollars, now allocated out through the application process once the board kind of gets that process up and running and streamlined. But that is has been a large part of the missing link for conservation groups and conservation efforts to really drive the amount of federal dollars to Mississippi that we know we can achieve. We've just missed out because federal dollars require state-based match. So they need some matching dollars that are non-federal, and the Conservation Trust Fund is going to service that. So hopefully I did that well enough and didn't confuse anybody, but that's what it is.
For sure. $10 million this year. We have commitments from leadership in our state that they'll try to do 20 million this coming year, which was we tried to get 20 million last year.
Yeah.
It's important because we'll be able to turn that 20 million potentially into 30 or 40, 50 million if we're smart about how we use the matching funds. Ed, coming over to you, if we look, you mentioned the Farm Bill a few minutes ago. We got reauthorization we're looking at now. When you look inside that Farm Bill, there are other federal funds, by the way, but the majority of the federal funds that we probably will have access to will come from the Farm Bill. Lots of little tranches of money inside there. You mentioned CRP a few minutes ago. The most successful Farm Bill conservation effort in United States history is the CRP program. There is potentially, well, first of all, let's do this. The Farm Bill reauthorization, can we potentially look for a lot more money in the Farm Bill coming up? And secondly, there are going to be are there going to be any new buckets that you're aware of? But certainly, even if there aren't, there are a lot of buckets that we're going to be able to match, aren't there?
There are tons of new buckets, and we talked about our biologists turning dirt and working with contractors out on the land in Mississippi. I've been working pretty hard the last couple of months since the Mississippi legislature ended, trying to get federal funds and working on new programs at the federal level to then bring back to Mississippi and to the rest of the South. And one of the biggest that just got passed and will get signed into law by President Biden in the next several days is the Inflation Reduction Act. That includes billions for conservation, and that's going to private landowners, and that's going to be through conservation easements, through the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, through EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentive Program. $5 billion, $8.5 billion, $1.5 billion over the next 10 years through that legislation. We're talking about huge amounts of funding, and that's just for private lands, not to mention the public land dollars for national wildlife refuges, for state wildlife management areas that we've been able to get across the goal line. So, you know, all of these funds require matching either from a landowner or from a state entity, and the trust fund is perfectly poised to do that. We've talked about the cost of conservation going up over the first part of this show. These funds will help address that problem, and I'm excited to see that the trust fund is perfectly situated to help bring more dollars back to the state of Mississippi for the whole state, not just the Delta, not just the coast, not just North Mississippi, but for the entire state.
Well, okay, so the Stewardship Trust Fund passed last year. $10 million is in it initially. Again, I mentioned that hopefully we'll get $20 million in subsequent years. You have a board of trustees that's going to be appointed by the lieutenant governor and the governor. Those appointments are getting made as we speak. One of the real wins last year was that there was some discussion about whether private lands would be involved or not. Private lands are involved. One of the reasons private land needed to be involved was because of the Farm Bill and the point that Ed just made just a few minutes ago. The other is whether organizations like yours, Nature Conservancy, Delta Wildlife, Wildlife Mississippi is what I was trying to think of course. Ducks Unlimited and others could apply. You were included in the process. By the way, along the way, both of your names were mentioned to me as potential trustees, and I said, oh, no, we don't want them to be on the selection committee. They will be better for this process being on the outside looking in, so they can go out and really encourage others and their own organizations to seek as much federal money as possible. Seems to me that one of the most important parts of this will be not only the quality and innovation embedded in each of the projects that people want to get funded, but it's also going to be determined. I hope the selection process has a very heavy burden on the federal matching fund piece of this. So Alex, have you had an opportunity to consider being a part of the trustee?
Yeah, I mean, much like you said, we wanted to be at arm's length on that, and really felt like that needed to be driven by private individuals across the state, leaders across the state. And, you know, our biggest interest in the whole effort, as much as Ed and Wildlife Mississippi and other conservation groups, is making sure those dollars are leveraged significantly and that they go to projects that are making the largest impact and across the state. So that's really where I want to be able to help, and I know Ed wants to be able to help, and we actually, you know, see ourselves working in partnership on a lot of those efforts going forward. So that's the role that I think Ed would shake his head and tell you that we want to help play.
Ed, anything to add to that, my friend?
No, I mean, we do have some great appointees. Both the Lieutenant Governor and Governor Reeves made their appointment selections. They're from around the state, and according to the law that got signed, they've got to come from the congressional districts. They've got to come from the Supreme Court districts. So we've got a good distribution of good decision makers, and we look forward to working with them and making sure that they make those decisions on project selection that are best for the state, that have clear, transparent oversight of this fund, of this trust fund. So, we got basically everything we wanted in the program the first year, and now we got to make sure that it's successful. And that's going to come down to every Mississippian and every member of this coalition and so many others to make sure that happens.
Well, there was a lot of interest in forming this. I think it was a big win to have a board of trustees overseeing it. Then you have these ex officio members, probably more ex officio members than in the history of the state, overseeing and representing certain aspects of government. So that there's nothing wrong with that. At the end of the day, we need to make sure that we're spending this money wisely and appropriately. And if we can do that and really show some incredibly first-year demonstration projects, then I think that might incent the legislature and state leadership to want to even put more money in it. Because if you think about what other states are doing, 10, 20 million, that's a great start, but it's not relative to what we could be doing. And when you consider the amount of matching funds and the investment this would be, we could certainly do a lot more. So hopefully we can hit it out of the park. Have they completed the process of announcing who the trustees are going to be, Alex?
Yeah, I see Ed's shaking his head. I believe the trustees have all been named. I think that, now the last few steps is really kind of building out the staff that will help support the program. And that staff will be housed inside a DFA, if I remember the statute correctly, and is likely the most important part of the puzzle is getting the right staff in place to make sure that that's a very strong proposal process, as well as the distribution of funds, as well as driving the transparency side of things too, in partnership with the trustees that are overseeing it.
Yeah. Anything to add to that, Ed?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to point out that this is housed in the Department of Finance and Administration. It's not part of another state agency, so there is some independence there. And we do have to make sure that we have a manager in place that understands conservation, that understands partnerships, that understands public funding and everything that's attached to that. Because we do, and I want to stress this very clearly, that we do want transparency and good oversight on this. You mentioned all the folks that are on the board, ex officio and otherwise. There's a lot of names on the race car and a lot of folks that want to make sure this thing runs fast and smooth. So it's got a lot of eyes on it, and it should, because it's important for the state and it shows how important Mississippi Outdoors is to us. So.
No question about that. We have Ed Penny from Ducks Unlimited and Alex Littlejohn from the Nature Conservancy. They were part of the core team that worked with an incredible coalition of people who love the outdoors and love outdoors recreation, working with the state legislature and state leadership to get us to a point where we now have an Outdoors Stewardship Trust Fund that can really leave a legacy for our kids and our kids' kids. When we come back, we'll continue this part of the conversation. We'll see you for the final segment of Super Talk Outdoors after this break.
We live in one of the best places in America to enjoy the outdoors. So let's talk about it. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors from the Foundation Studio. I have my friends Ed Penny from Ducks Unlimited and Alex Littlejohn from the Nature Conservancy. We're just catching up, seeing what the latest is in their worlds and what are they hearing these days. And more specifically, in the last segment, last two segments, we're kind of drilling down a little bit on the Outdoors Stewardship Trust Fund that we all work so closely together on. And we knew the state would do this. There was never any doubt in my mind that we would do this. I think it takes time to get aligned around something like this that has so much positive impact, but it can be a little complicated to get your head around. And the other thing is you don't want to do this halfway. It was really important for us to have all the conversations that needed to be had so that the resulting legislation was complete. You know what? In an effort like this, Alex, the last thing we wanted was legislation to pass that had a lot of little warts in it that would need to be cleaned up later. It seemed like we got this one pretty much right the first time.
Yeah, looking back on it, I think we were all somewhat a little frustrated with ourselves not getting it right out the gate the first session and running with it. But that's partly because it's so new, and we understood what needed to be done and how impactful a program like this could be to the state, because we're in it every day. But when you're trying to pass something like this that is so monumental, so historical, it needs to be fleshed out, and rightfully so. And it shouldn't have passed in the first. Looking back on it, it shouldn't have passed in the first round. It deserved the time and the effort that was given to it, both from the coalition side to conservation groups that were after it, as well as the legislature side. It takes time to think through these things. How would it work? And they know things that we're not privy to, and vice versa. So there's a learning curve there, but it's not for lack of interest on both sides, but believe they got it right, the last session.
Yeah, when I say pretty much got it right, I mean, listen, no legislation is perfect coming out of the gate. Right. The nature of the legislative process is that there might be some tweaks that need to be made in the future. But Ed, one area that I wish we would have really nailed down is a dedicated funding source. Because without a dedicated funding source, it means that we're going to have to sort of ramp it up every year. And I don't say fight for the dollars, but sometimes it does become a fight for the dollars. The good news is that we have a lot of legislative support for continuing this over time. But had we had a dedicated funding source, we would have not had to go back every single year and had this conversation. Now, that's probably the big additional sort of refinement that I would make in the next couple of years if we were going to make one. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, dedicated conservation funding through a sporting goods sales tax diversion makes perfect sense. There's a strong connection between what people are buying and what people are using those things for: hunting, fishing, outdoor recreation. So that precedent is something that we want to work on. Obviously, we need to educate folks more. We need to talk to our legislators and make sure that they understand that connection. There are a lot of priorities that they have to fund every year. Conservation should be top 3, top 5 at the very least. And we want to make sure that we have robust, significant, dedicated funding through a sales tax or something similar to help fund all the things that we care so deeply about.
Well, the quickest way, Alex, to get to a point where we can have a conversation about a dedicated funding source is to come out of the gate with programs that are incredibly innovative and very, very specific, and that add to outdoor recreation for the state in ways that people would just be blown away by. And we take that 10 million and we turn it into 20 or 30, excuse me, the 20 and 30 million with federal funds. That will make having a future conversation about a dedicated funding source a lot easier to have, won't it?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the proof will be in the pudding at that point, in terms of not only programs or projects that you're able to fund. My hopes are that we show that there's a much larger need than can be fulfilled with the current allocation of $10 million, which Ed and I both will tell you is likely very much the case. You may not see it in the first cycle, but you definitely by second cycle it will come into fruition, just because people are new to the process and new to the program. But I will tell you, if we can show, and we will be able to show, I firmly believe that the need or the amount of dollars just can't meet the need that we know is out there, and especially when it comes to leveraging all the federal dollars that we've talked about here. So absolutely, I agree with you 100%.
Well, it is exciting. I don't care who I've talked to since this legislation got passed, whether it was Delbert Hosemann himself or the Speaker or the Secretary of State, that is really pushing hard in his efforts to say you got to involve non-governmental. You got to have You got to have private property owners involved, because a statewide conservation effort needs to involve all land, both public and private. But everybody's excited about it. Everybody's excited, and I can't wait to start talking about some of these projects so that people can really start to get their head around it, because there's a direct relation between the stuff we're going to be doing with the Outdoors Stewardship Trust Fund and our opportunities, and generationally, to enjoy the outdoors in Mississippi. It's been a pleasure, Ed Penny and Alex Littlejohn. Thank you for joining me today, my friends.
Thank you, Ricky.
Thank you, Ricky.
Been great. Hey, listen, as I always end my show, have a great time in the outdoors. We'll see you next week. But please always put safety first. Put safety first. God bless you and have a great day, and we'll see you next Monday.
Mississippi.